just going to start talking and then I'll edit out the bits where I'll just talk about the clean start. Okay?
Of course, no worries.
Editing. Okay.
Oh no.
Okay, welcome to our podcast. Say hello, Brian.
Hello, Brian.
And I'm Joel, and you are listening to Buffy Boys. I feel like maybe we should have said that together, but we didn't.
Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys.
Buffy.
Buffy. Okay, well, thanks for giving us a go anyway. So what is our podcast about? So we are, as you will probably have guessed if you're listening to this, or I'm actually getting quite a loud thing where you're right now.
Quite a loud thing?
Yeah.
You just turned down.
Okay. I'm going to figure all this out, yeah.
Is that better?
But let me have a...
Sure, yeah, no worries. Joel doesn't really know how to use the microphones yet. It's a bit embarrassing.
I'll probably cut that bit out, like...
Oh. That was my best joke.
Best joke so far. Okay.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes. So this is Buffy Boys. So as you probably have guessed, if you're listening to this podcast and from the artwork and the name, what we do here, or what we're intending to do, is watch every episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and comment on it with our unique opinions and our unique podcast show format. So I suppose Brian might be useful to say a little bit about ourselves before we get started. So
sure. It is the most unique, and definitely more unique than Gilmore Guys or Treks in the City or any of those shite podcasts.
Okay, that's all going to be redacted.
No, it's not. Don't you dare.
So we don't get sued.
Well, no, it's an agreed on format. I think people do this. People do the watchy and talky.
Except we're going to do it better. That's the plan, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so it's an open source format. Okay, so basically, the idea we had and what we wanted to do is listen, walk through Buffy, and basically look at it in terms of, as fans of the show, as how Buffy has influenced our lives, how it's influenced kind of television and media in the 21 years, I want to say, since it was originally aired in 1997. Yeah. And just talk about just some of the themes in Buffy and kind of how it was groundbreaking as a program. My personal belief, and I'll probably say this more than once over the course of watching the show, is that if Buffy was released today, if there was this new show that no one ever heard of called Buffy the Vampire Slayer and did exactly what it did 20 years ago, it would be groundbreaking. Everyone would be amazed by it. It would be unlike anything else on television. And I did it in the deep dark past of the 90s, where there was nothing even remotely similar to some of the quality of the TV that we have at the moment. For sure.
I think we'll also be looking at other things too. I mean, for one thing, I've never actually watched the show. This is probably the only subject in which I know slightly more than Joel, or well, maybe somewhat more than you, but not too much.
In this pop culture space, I am a bit of a nerd, and I suppose what I bring to the format or to the podcast is I absorb all the useless information with television shows, things like character names and continuity and references and cameos. That's all my jam. Well, Brian looks at the boring stuff like themes and emotional moments and actual filmography and hairography.
Yeah. There's a lot of that in this, really. They need it to cover up all the stuntables.
Stunt doubles.
Yeah,
we'll be coming to that.
Stuntablets.
Stuntablets. That's the French.
Oh, okay.
So I have a lot to say as we go on about the quality and some of the choices in terms of some of the special effects, particularly in these earlier seasons. I have a deep and abiding love for the first seasons of science fiction and fantasy TV shows, just because they are so earnest and so tragically underproduced and underfunded.
Sure.
I don't think Brian has quite the same patience for particularly some of these earlier episodes of Buffy.
No, I hate them, which is funny because they were like the first season of Buffy was like a big moment for me when I was younger, to get a chance to go back and watch it at some point, because I started watching it when I was like, I know, maybe 13, 14. No, sorry, yeah. No, a bit 11, and had to go back and watch the first season because I wasn't watching it when I was 6. But the first season is not good.
Okay.
Oh, we haven't actually. Have we explained that we're going to watch like every? We're going to it's going to be one episode per episode. Is that?
Yeah. So format and facts and useful things to know as a listener.
This is a spoiler-free zone. That's an important part there.
So yeah, in terms of the format, as I say, we're going to be the plan is to release this. Actually, I don't know if we agree how often weekly, right?
Yeah, I think so. You'd have to release it weekly, or you're going to die before finishing it.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, this is going to be a weekly podcast. We're going to look at one episode at a time. As Brian alluded to, this probably isn't the best podcast to listen to if you're watching Buffy for the first time, as we will be talking extensively about jumping back and forth in terms of characters, where they end up, how things relate to things that happen later on. Or maybe you're just not as anal about that as I am. I know that Brian is in the camp of spoilers are not a thing for him, where I can be quite, would you say pedantic is the word to use here, Brian, about spoilers?
Precious about spoilers.
Precious.
You feel like something's irretrievably lost if you find out something outside of the appropriate format.
Like Tears in the Rain, yes.
Like Tears in the Rain.
But I suppose just for a sense of neatness, starting off with just to describe, I suppose, just a little bit briefly, elevator pitch about what Buffy is actually about. Vampires and the slaying of same. So essentially Buffy is about Buffy Summers. Nearly forgot her last name there for a second. Buffy Summers, who is a 15-year-old high schooler. 16 at the start?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So off to a great start, knowing what the show is about. So Buffy Summers is a 16-year-old high schooler in America who is the one slayer chosen in every generation who can fight the forces of evil, in particular vampires, who are her bread and butter in terms of monster slaying. Mm-hmm. And she has to balance this prophecy of being the one girl who's imbued with all this power with the equally difficult travails of being a high schooler and boys, some of whom are also vampires, and what's fashionable in California at the moment, which it turns out is very little, and fashion in this period, and the questionable choices thereof is something that we'll be looking at as well as we go along. Okay, so I think what might be useful before we get into the episode, the first episode, is Welcome to the Hellmouth. Just as kind of a bit of background, just to give some context, Brian, maybe if you want to tell us a little bit about what's your history with Buffy, or what's your recollection of it before we got to doing this podcast. What was the road that led you here? Sure.
Well, I mean, Buffy was kind of the first great love of mine in terms of a TV show that you could really engage with. When it was kind of at its most popular post season 2 time, when I was kind of at the right age for it. So when I was about 11 or 12, I would have watched season 4. I remember the first episode I watched was the episode where Tara's family comes into town, and I watched it at my grandparents' house after swimming one week, and I just thought it was really cool. I thought it was real grown up. Actually, I might have watched a little bit of Charmed before that, but that was trash. But yeah, it was really cool. I thought it was just really engaging and weird and wonderful. And I ended up like wanting to kind of find out more about it. And I remember for my 12th birthday, I asked my parents for Buffy season 1 on DVD, and that took 6 million years to get to me because it was Amazon purchases in the early noughties, and then I watched it and I bought all the VHSs, and they were cool. But then kind of the more recent past, I probably would have gotten I would have watched it on and off over the years when I was in my teens. Then when I was maybe 18 or 19, I rewatched the whole thing through again when it was on YouTube. Like, no joke. The whole series was on YouTube. It was in like 15-minute segments, and the whole thing was there. There was like one like part missing per 20, I'd say. Mm-hmm. They'd have to go off and find it somewhere else, but like it was there still. But yeah, it was all on YouTube. It was there for, I'd say, maybe 2 years. When it was like 2009, 2008, when YouTube wasn't really. It probably was maybe pre-Google YouTube.
And when people used to stream TV shows when they wanted to watch them, like heathens.
Exactly, yeah, heathens. So I watched through it all then. Again, I think it was the first time I ever watched a couple episodes of season 6, actually, funnily enough. And then and that was great. It was like real, like I walked away from that saying, this is the best TV show ever made, which was a title previously held by, I think at that point, 6 Feet Under. Carnival at one point had been that. I think The Wire had been that for me at some point before then. But yeah, no. So I was real on board with the Buff train, and and then more recently we watched the True together. Probably I don't know, like started about 6 years ago. We finished it. Well, I don't think we finished season 7 watching through it together, but we'll probably do it this time. And we watched through that. We had our big old discussions in the middle of the night while we were kind of drunk about Buffy and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of the whole history of me and Buffy.
And I think those like quite fairly drunk, semi-literate conversations are probably the genesis of this kind of effort to try and plug into some more of a structure. I suppose my history with Buffy is probably coming to it slightly later in the game, because my distinct memory of Buffy when I was growing up and it would have been on television. I was quite a precious child, and I had no stomach whatsoever for any kind of horror or anything even remotely spooky. I was traumatized by Night of the Living Dead. I was traumatized by The Mummy, the one with Brendan Fraser in it. Just really no ability to engage with that at all. So I have recollection of Buffy as being something that my very cool, much cooler kind of gothy babysitter would have watched, and it was also very much in that space of vampires and fantasy and monster, which wasn't really what I was into as a child. I was very much, I was a staunch science fiction fan. I thought that all the fantasy stuff was quite like
bad,
frivolous. But it's something I started watching more as it went on, and I have a bad history with not actually finishing television shows, particularly ones that I really enjoy. So I would have watched all of season 1 up until probably the start of season 7, and then I skipped almost all of the middle of season 7 and just watched the finale episode and was very confused by all the characters that were in it, which is something I've done with a number of different programs. I would have been very fond, perhaps to my detriment, of the spin-off show from Buffy, Angel, which is more of a noir kind of gumshoe, hard-boiled kind of show set in the same universe, but without, it must be admitted, the same feminist and female-focused narrative that Buffy gives us,
which we will not be watching concurrently with Buffy.
No, I did suggest when we originally watched Buffy through together that we should watch Angel at the same time as it was broadcast, and as I would argue the narrative expects people to be watching both shows, but that probably won't be what we attempt to do here.
No, thank you. One of my favourite stories that you have about Buffy is about your parents watching it downstairs. So tell that story, please.
Yeah, so essentially our first spoiler, I suppose the first spoiler was that Buffy is a vampire slayer. But there is a scene in, I want to say it was almost certainly in season 6, where Buffy is having a bit of an emotional breakdown and is having a reasonably graphic softcore sex in a crumbling house, which I was watching on the small television up in my bedroom. My parents were also watching downstairs, and as this scene got more and more heated, my parents started banging on the roof of their room with a broom, telling me to turn the television off, and I was very embarrassed. I think that was around that time that I was generally expected to just stop watching Buffy as it got more too mature for me.
Oh wow. I remember, weirdly, my father specifically always had weird issues with us watching some TV shows. He really hated us watching The Simpsons, and Friends. He absolutely hated. He both thought it was American garbage and thought it was ridiculous representation, that people were just constantly sleeping with each other, and it wasn't. It's probably a bit blasphemous for him as well. But he never weirdly took issue with Buffy, which I always found a bit weird, because he specifically took issue with Sabrina, which is a slightly easier going TV show.
It's a gateway drug to witchcraft. I
think they all thought that I really fancied Sarah Michelle Gellar at the time, so I think that might have been a bit of a salve. So, oh well.
If your father did watch Friends and you had a favourite friend, it would be Ross.
It would be Ross, yeah. It would 100% be Ross. He would think he's just, doing his best, really trying hard, and
they really shouldn't have eaten a sandwich.
Definitely should not have eaten a sandwich, and they were definitely on a break. which was the easiest joke I could make there. I'm sorry.
Okay, but this isn't Friends, fellas. This is Buffy Boys.
Friend zone.
Friend zone. I could see friend zone.
Friend zone. I think friend zone.
Friend zone.
Yeah, and you're if you call it friend zone, you have to specifically address the horrible homophobia and like treatment of women in Friends.
So we
and transphobia.
And transphobia specifically. Huge. So yeah, just slight tangent. We have rewatched a little bit of early Friends recently, and it's quite funny. And very homophobic and transphobic. Super and just homophobic. Not really able to deal with those issues.
Oh, Ross, to be honest, pretty much.
Generally Ross.
Yeah.
Ross is just a trash human.
Oh, a complete scumbag.
Did I say Ross or Rosh?
Rosh.
Okay, Buffy. So I think would be a fun thing to do now before in terms of introducing the actual plot of this episode is, Brian, if you can tell me your recollection of what happened in this episode of Buffy which you watched recently.
We watched it a week ago, for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that has set me at a complete disadvantage to start with. So that's rude. But yeah, I notoriously don't have a particularly good memory for this kind of thing, so Joel's trying to take advantage of that, and I think that's just mean. But also I agreed to do it a couple of days ago. So yeah, let's go for it. I have notes in front of me about what happened in this episode, but I won't use them. I've watched this episode approximately 18 or 20 times so in my life, so I really should know exactly what happens here, but I don't. So Xander's skating.
Mm-hmm.
He nearly hits Cordelia. He's talking to Jesse, I think is his name. Then there's a bunch of blank. Buffy wakes up from a dream. The master dream.
To do,
yeah, she is often dreaming. She has some funny interactions with Joyce, and Joyce is really good. I remember that. They go to school. She says, please don't leave the school. Oh wait, no. She says, please don't get kicked out. And stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And please be good. And then Buffy goes to talk to the principal. The principal likes her and then doesn't like her. Darla was there. She killed a guy.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't the boy. They find the body at some point. Buffy and Cordelia get on for about 3 seconds.
Several characters from the show, yeah.
Yep, and that's uncomfortable. Even though Cordelia is the only... Yeah, she's so great. But then Buffy talks to Willow, and that's nice. And then Willow and Buffy talk to Xander, that's not nice. And then they all go to the Bronze. On the way to the Bronze, Buffy meets Angel. Angel is there. Buffy does... she flies in the air a little bit.
Mm.
Then they go to the Bronze and they're dancing.
What? Sorry, she flies?
Yeah, she's like upside down on a bar up in the air.
She's doing some parkour.
She's parkouring. Yeah. They go to the Bronze and Buffy attacks Cordelia. Willow goes to have some sexy fun with a vampire, and then Jesse gets bitten, and then Luke attacks Buffy.
And then what's the most important part of the end of the episode? What happens after? To be continued. That's reasonably... those are several events that happen in the course of this episode. Right. Almost entirely in the right order, so we're off to a good start. So essentially the opening shot of the episode that we have is the establishing shot of the high school. What this... I suppose if you strip back everything you know about Buffy and all the years to come later on...
Mm-hmm.
The show is establishing a very formulaic looking monster plot, vampire and high schools and girls in distress, etc., and is using that as a jumping off point to do some stuff that's quite subversive. So a lot of the initial episodes are very traditional plot wise, very B-movie plot wise, and so the opening segment that we have is of a boy and a girl being led into the high school. The boy leading the girl saying it'll be safe in here, I know a place we can go to mac on each other, have some nookie or whatever. Her seeming quite scared, and he is very much presented as, you know, if you were to look at him in any other film, you'd be like, there's the vampire. You know, he is wearing paler makeup, he's out of date clothes, mm-hmm. He looks sinister, etc., and she looks quite virginal, and she looks very nervous around him, and so that's really setting up from the go that you know, spoiler, she turns out to be the vampire, and she's Darla, and Darla is one of the longer running vampire characters in the wider Buffy and Angel canon.
Sure.
But she is the first example of having this final girl kind of archetype of being preyed on, etc., and she is turning it around on the man essentially and ekes him. And,
sure.
And this character, who according to the Buffy the Vampire Slayer Wikipedia is named Chris, is actually named in the episode, is our first death of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He is drained and is the body that you mentioned that is discovered later on. So I think that's a really interesting way to start it off, is literally in the opening scene being like, here is the trope that we are going to subvert with the show.
But I mean, like, that, yes, I think that's definitely a part of it. Is that not also just like complete rehash of the 50s femme fatale kind of idea? The woman who, you know, seems so innocent and so unable, but actually has been tricking you all along.
Yeah, I can definitely see that there are elements of that in there, but I think specifically in the way that Darla is coded and presented as like very much like she is 15 years old, he's a college guy, etc., that kind of thing. You know, it's this real sense of, you know, and something that is recurrent throughout Buffy in both you know, sinister and heroic ways, the sense of women or various characters being in vulnerable situations and then finding power. I think that the entire just the opening feel of the show, it feels like an episode of something like Are You Afraid of the Dark or Goosebumps. Is something a little kind of like Nick at Night, and a little kind of like, you know, just like very, you know, it's something that could have run for one season, you know, in some ways. Yeah,
no, I think, but like, I think you're right. I mean, I think the opening is specifically a showing an awareness of a trope and subverting it. And I definitely, when I watched it originally, knew who Darla was. So like, I'd already known who Darla was when I was watching it, and I was like, oh, that's Darla. So this is not
loses some of the impact.
It did, to some degree. But no, you're right. I think that's definitely the portrayal there, and I think that's like an immediate awareness. When we're talking about like women in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I suspect may come up a couple of times, are we acknowledging the fact that Joss Whedon has an awful reputation at the moment?
I will be upfront and say I'm aware of this as a thing. I don't actually know much of the details of what he's done.
His ex-wife came forward and was like, he has been horrible to me. He and also his representation of women has been dodged over the years. Apart from Buffy, Dollhouse is a clusterfuck.
Famously, Cordelia's character as well, as she goes on later in the arc, you know, gets a bit.
Yeah, she does not do. Yeah, she does get fridged. But so I mean, like, funny enough though, the whole of Buffy the Vampire Slayer is, I'm gonna argue, a very, very good feminist text. I mean, if not saying that it's a perfect representation of women or women's issues, I don't think it is that, but I think it constantly asks the question, and I think it constantly puts women at the forefront. Mm-hmm. I think that's the beginning of any good proper feminist text.
Yeah, it's a discursive space essentially. You know, it's as a show, it's somewhere where people are having discussions about feminism, and you know, it's very early on, even in this episode, in terms of Buffy's, you know, genuine friendship with Willow, and engaging with her in a way which is not you know, performative, or not about a boy, or not about something kind of shallow. Really kind of like puts paid to something which I probably won't mention very often on this podcast because it's so implied by the show, but the Bechdel test.
Yeah, sure.
And so essentially, you know, for people who aren't aware, the Bechdel test being that you know, being able to look at a movie or a show and saying, from a feminist point of view, does it have two female characters who have names, who have an interaction with each other which isn't about a man?
Yeah, which I mean, like, the idea behind it is that you have like an incredibly simple rule set. Like, you know, like that seems like a really easy one to pass pretty much all the time. Mm-hmm. But I think 2011 was the first year where the majority of high earning movies for the year, or like the blockbusters for the years, passed the Bechdel test. I think one of them big question marks there was Gravity at the time, because obviously that featured a really strong female character. Yeah, but she doesn't really interact with any other women.
There are nuances to it, and there's definitely arguments to be said that you can have a feminist or a well representative text that doesn't pass the Bechdel test. Sure. It's just very unlikely, you know. And so I think, you know, it's something that it seems really obvious, and it should be really obvious. But putting women as the protagonists or the central characters very easily addresses those issues. You know, like one that jumps to mind from this period as well is Xena the Warrior Princess.
Is it Xena the Warrior Princess? Is not Xena a warrior princess?
I actually don't know. She's the definitive article in my opinion.
Yeah, I know, but I've always felt it was like Xena, warrior princess.
That could be the case.
Remember the awful voiceover over the credits? I do,
and Craig's on Buffy is something which we should get into as well.
That's true.
But you know, Xena as a spin-off of Hercules: The Legendary Journeys, Hercules had a lot of trouble having female characters in it who weren't being rescued or maimed or disrobed in various ways, and by having Xena as a female version that was a very strong companionship with Gabrielle, which was quite clearly a lesbian relationship as far as anyone was concerned, including the actresses. It puts paid to this, and this is what Buffy does by putting Buffy herself at the center of the narrative. It's very easy for every scene she does to pass the Bechdel test, but also she just doesn't talk about men that often, despite all the various issues she has with terrible men throughout the show.
Sure, it's more like for Buffy generally, it's more like it's a privilege sometimes, or like a treat that she gets to like. I think there's like there's some episode where she's just like, I wish I could just sit around and talk about boys and blah blah blah. And, like there's a few episodes like that. But yeah, that's definitely it's a very much a side comment to the whole thing, is the fact that, you know, Buffy doesn't get the chance to, like, you know, be worried about men because she's about to die most of the time. Another show, if we're going to be talking about 90s feminism in TV shows, like, it has to be Gilmore Girls. Not saying again that it's a perfect representation of women. Like, both of them are absolutely ridiculous at points. Not to suggest women can't be ridiculous, but also
do they watch Buffy at any point on Gilmore Girls? That seems like something they would reference.
They don't actually.
Okay. I
can't think of any Buffy references in Gilmore Girls right now, but that could be potentially because they were too concurrent. They overlap too much. So and also shared writers like Jane Espenson, Jane Thingamajig.
We'll drop that in later on.
Okay, we'll drop that in later on. But yeah, but she wrote for both of them, so that could be part of it, that like it's it's hard to fit. It's hard to like mishmash them and have references to something that's so concurrent. And Gilmore Girls mostly refers to reasonably older texts. I know when it refers to Magnolia or
they do have a fascination with 40s and 50s and 60s.
Yes, yeah, for sure. But 70s as well. But I think when they refer to Magnolia and Boogie Nights in season 1, it was a real like weird moment for me anyway. But we're getting too off track here. One of the things that I noticed about the opening was that it had cross-faded shots, and that was horrifying.
I also noticed that.
I had a note about it.
I also have a note about that in my notes as well. I also noted that one of the first things we see in the classroom, which is the biology classroom, is a skeleton.
Sure.
And I thought for a second it was an actual skeleton, like an evil skeleton, and then I realised it's just a skeleton in a classroom.
Yep.
Something we should comment on as well, for anyone who hasn't seen season 1 in a very long time, it's an incredibly dark show. Physically, there are not many light sources in those episodes.
No, it is dark as fuck. It's really difficult to see, make out what's happening in some scenes. I mean, like, it's shockingly badly color graded. It probably wasn't color graded at all. It's
very obscure, and between that and the 4:3 ratio, it's very much like trying to view a show through a postage stamp.
Yeah, I remember when I was younger, it was one of the things that you did while watching Buffy was you drew the blinds and you drew the curtains potentially, because
so you could see the show.
Like if you're watching it, well, I'd often be watching it recorded from the TV on VHS, which would mean the quality would be like next to nothing. So you would have no fucking idea what's going on because it's so fucking dark. But yeah, no, this first scene is true to the form. It is really, really dark. It's just impossible to see.
Yeah, and that is something that continues throughout this season. Also, generally, the special effects in this season are crunchy in places, and it really picks up, I think, for season 2. But let's try and make some headway through the episode. So, in terms of when Buffy herself is first introduced, so she's introduced in Beg. She's moved into the new house in Sunnydale.
Yep.
She is having a very 90s dream of the a vampire lord, which we later come to know is the Master.
He sure is.
Some very rough looking zombies in slash vampires in different levels of makeup in a graveyard. There's a couple of shots of monsters from later in the season, and just really generic, just kind of like stock footage of vampires and pools of blood and things like that. So it's crosses and all that. Yeah, so it's a style that I don't think, again, they're obviously trying to find their footing, but it's a style of melodrama that I don't think really continues when they move forward.
Moving forward, Buffy generally shows rather than tells, in that, which is obviously a fairly stupid phrase to use there, but it really specifically like when it's trying to create that kind of atmosphere, it creates that atmosphere as opposed to like trying to lean on a bunch of stock images or spooky scary kind of things. It'll tell you spooky scary things as opposed to, wait, maybe it tells and doesn't show. Anyway, we skipped right past the opening credits though, Joel.
Yeah, so I think there's quite a lot to be said with the opening credits. I don't know if we want to go through that now, but
of course we do.
My big takeaway from the opening credits in the first season is that what I find quite jarring watching them is there are sound effects during the opening credits.
Yeah,
so usually that, or just different things. So usually the credits will be the actual sound from the episodes, or anything to do with what's on screen will be silent, and there's just music and non-diegetic sounds. But in this case, it's actually the odd kind of like creaking open of a coffin or whatever. Okay,
so that's an interesting point you just made there, because that's actually not true as far as I know. Those sounds are part of the song. They're part of the track. So that screaming sound, that isn't lifted from that episode, as far as I know.
Okay, that's a good point, but they don't. So
they're synced in an odd way.
Yeah, but I don't think that sound, for example, the screeching sound when the book is opened or whatever, I don't think that continues in later seasons.
Okay.
Whereas, for example, with if you want to take the theme song from Friends, they always have to match up something to the clapping in Friends.
Sure.
I don't think they find something in later seasons to match up to that screeching sound. I think that they just cook it out.
Yeah, maybe. One of the things that I only found out. One of the things that I was really excited for when I started watching season 1 was, cannot wait for Willow to become a witch. It's going to happen in the first 2 episodes. It's going to be so exciting. She's going to discover magical powers. Wow, wonderful. Because spoiler, Willow is a witch. Or becomes a witch. No, hard to say. But
well, does she become a lesbian?
Oh,
because if she is currently a lesbian, then she's also currently a witch.
Yes. So, but that's not Willow in the opening credits, and I always thought it was. I thought it was her experiencing some magical powers for the first time when it's like the hat, like during the screech and the hand reaching up and being like, ah!
I always thought that as well, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not Willow. It's not Alison Hannigan at all. It's from episode 3. It's
Amy?
No, it's Amy's mother.
Amy's mother, okay.
Or maybe it's Amy's actor, but as her mother?
Yeah, that's episode 3. We'll
sure. But anyway, it's. Oh, I think it is actually physically her mother. But anyway, it's one of the witches from episode 3, and that's just, I thought it was through me.
Something that Willow, which I found was a loss because I quite enjoyed it, was that early on Willow's whole thing is being like a techno witch, and Jenny Calendar as well as techno-pagan.
Sure.
It interfaces in such a fascinating way with the really blocky floppy disk technology that they have at the time. So they're really trying to say something that they think is #current about it.
And so it continues a little bit on.
A little bit, but by the end of it,
in season 6 and 7.
Yeah, by that point she's just like a Earth goddess type thing.
She sure is, yeah.
But she very specifically is her thing at the moment is she is the hacker.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in terms of when they obviously introduce, so the point of this episode and the point of the first episode of almost any fantasy or science fiction show is exposition, info dump. Here are the characters, here's the setting, here's the premise of what we're doing week on week. And I think that that's always a difficult thing to do for a genre show. I think Buffy does it reasonably well. I think it manages to tell a story in this episode while still being here's Mr. Giles, he's the librarian, here's Angel, he's mysterious and beautiful.
He is beautiful.
But what they do in the opening scene in the high school is there are some very sequential introductions of characters. So one of my big takeaways is that, and I think that when you watch TV shows that are produced in America, as Irish things, there's a lot of it you just take in without questioning it.
Sure.
And then you look at it again 10 years later and you're like, fucking hell, high schools are enormous.
Yes.
They're obscenely, and I know that you and I went to very different secondary schools, and even within that, I think they're obscenely like motorways in terms of corridors. It's bizarre.
Yeah. What's weird for me is that so for me with that, and I actually think we should go back there because we've skipped Joyce's introduction, and that's the only important part of this episode.
Yeah.
But with that, okay, I always presumed that I went to a really, really small secondary school. There were 50 people in my year overall when we started, and there were 30 people when we finished in 6th year, which is not a good sign. But
worse attrition rate than Sunnydale High.
Yeah, pretty much. I was a class protector, protector of myself. But I always presumed that the local secondary school, which was a reasonably large community school, which had probably I don't know, like 6 or probably 8 or 10 classes per year. I always presumed that was like high school size, essentially.
Yeah.
That Americans, when they talk about high school, it was that level. But American high schools are far, far larger than that even. They're like anything that we have in Ireland, anything that we have that's like supposed to indicate the size of that could like relatively represent the size of a high school in America is nothing even close.
They just operate on a larger scale, so I think that's quite jarring for one thing.
That was odd.
The whole high school culture, I think we see this a lot through like things like Veronica Mars as well. It's also so fundamentally different. But you're correct. I did skip over the introduction of Joyce Summers, Buffy's mother, and my notes on Joyce here say that Joyce is everything, and I think I stand by that. She is
everything.
From this like first moment in terms of just being supportive of Buffy, taking her to school and saying, please try not to get kicked out of this school. She's just a very strong character. She's a very nuanced character for a parent, because which is interesting because almost so this is originally presented as a high school show. These are teenagers. Every other parent on this show is basically Charlie Brown's parents. Yeah. Like they're complete, just you only see their feet and them going wah wah wah. And there's no actual real presence. Like I think Willow's mother is in one episode. Yes. Willow's father is never explained. Xander's father is kind of in one episode in a really terrifying way. It's the episode where they have the nightmares where the first Slayer is. Oh,
we should know the name of that, but yeah, okay.
Oh, of the episode?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dreams?
Dreams. Yes, the episode Dreams.
Yeah, the actual finale of season 4.
Yeah. Buffy's dad is in a couple of episodes, and it's something that they quickly get over as a thing.
I actually think he's only in one episode, to be honest, Joel. I think he only turns up in that one episode and he's referred to a bunch, but I don't know if he ever makes another appearance. I can't imagine they got that guest star back.
I'll have to look into that. I think he might be in 2.
Xander's parents are only ever voice upstairs.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of Xander's character specifically.
And yet, despite that, Joyce is such an incredibly central part of the show.
Yeah.
And she drops off Buffy, and she makes reference to the fact that they've just moved to Sunnydale. Yeah. And they moved there because Buffy got kicked out of her previous high school, Emory, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. Mm-hmm. This is my particular party piece. But they make reference to the fact, and Buffy does herself later in the episode, that she burnt down the high school gym. Yeah. So ostensibly, this is very broadly, I suppose, referencing some of the ideas behind the film movie. The Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, which came out about 5 years previously and was a very different tone. It's not canonical, essentially. Mm-hmm. It's not consistent in terms of the lore or the characterization, etc. But it does broadly have Buffy discovering and being introduced to the fact that she's a Slayer while in a different high school and having to defeat vampires, and it's implied and expanded a little bit later on in the show that something similar happened to our Buffy in the show. But in the movie, the high school, the gym doesn't burn down. There's a lot of distinctions there, but we do essentially have that this isn't the first place she has slayed. She has slayed before and she will slay again, essentially.
Yeah, important to note, Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie is not good. We'll have to watch it at some point if we get to, like, when we're doing our live shows for this podcast. It's not good. I didn't like it. There was a campy fun value to it to some degree, but actually, I watched it a bunch of years ago. I'm sure if I watch it now with a couple of drinks I'd have a good laugh, but
it's hard to draw a line between that film and this show.
It's it hits too many of the same notes in such a bad way.
It has Luke Perry in it as well.
It does have Luke Perry and Donald Sutherland.
Donald Sutherland does a decent job in it.
He does a decent job in pretty much everything. What I was going to say there for a moment there is Joyce. Joyce, very importantly for me, really echoes the parents from My So-Called Life. They're kind of concurrently the only real parental figures in teen drama at the time, I would imagine. I can't think of anyone major else, but I'm not huge on teen drama at the time. I suppose like Gilmore Girls, obviously, but that was a very different kind of show. But with specifically teen drama, I would say My So-Called Life is a very interesting equivalent there, in terms of having really fleshed out parentals, very specifically fleshed out parentals in an actually completely different way.
And kind of realistic relationships with them to some degree, or something that's relatable.
Joyce I think is going to be my character for the show. Rewatching it, Joyce and like Willow are the ones who, whenever I watch it, I'm like, I remember how much I love them.
They're the ones to walk through you
for sure.
My only note, otherwise I took away from that scene, is that Buffy is gorgeous, which I think is beautiful. Like, again, we've gotten used to looking at Sarah Michelle Gellar. She's a beautiful woman.
Oh, she's like actually stunning, and she has amazing ear piercings.
I haven't noticed that. I'll have to have a look at that in our fashion review.
But she has incredible ear piercings. They're really cool. But no, she's just stunning, tiny lady. She's great.
So I think there's an interesting juxtaposition of Buffy through this episode as kind of like this like perfect popular girl, you know, kind of like this sweet, but also got kicked out of school, because there's a whole tension there. And then we have the other characters are introduced, and I feel like in this episode they're all presented a little bit younger than they actually are. They're a little trending of like, they come off like kind of like 15, kind of like for example, like, so Xander is introduced is gliding into the scene on a skateboard and wipes himself out on a railing, which is just a bit Dennis the Menace, and he actually uses the skateboard quite a bit throughout this episode. Yeah,
he does. I don't think he ever does again though. I was actually just as you're saying that, I was thinking, is that intentional? Are they intentionally portrayed as being these much younger characters before Buffy comes into their lives? I mean, is it that, you know, when before Buffy comes along they have genuine childhoods?
Yeah, well, that's an incredibly depressing but possibly accurate point to make.
They haven't. Buffy completely fucks up their lives.
All of Xander and Willow's references to their life before Buffy are always very like pajama parties, watching a Charlie Brown Christmas.
They're still a little depressing, but like it's not. No one's dying.
Yeah, it's very small. It's very, but all the references are, you know, they could be 10 when the references are happening. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. One of the things I want to note there is when Willow gets introduced, is her fashion is atrocious. Like, I mean, she looks like her mother dressed her, and she would fit in today in a heartbeat. The way she's dressed, it's all lank, long, really kind of like modelly hair, and it's the kind of with that dress with the straps on top. What do you call those?
Well, see, this is interesting. So this like really like plain brown dress. I have tartan written down. I don't think
it was tartan.
It's a tartan.
No, it was.
I think it might be tartan. I think I wrote down tartan because you think about it as a single piece of brown fabric in your mind, but I think it was actually tartan. This is consistently, as Willow becomes more powerful and more dykey as the show goes on, like this is a reference as like her egg phase, like a very kind of like, but compared to some of the things that other people are wearing in this high school, like it is in no way embarrassing. You know, there are people wearing like polka dot plastic Macintoshes and all this kind of stuff.
Xander's wearing like a see-through shirt with a vest underneath. It's horrifying.
It's a mesh shirt and a vest, and he wears it for the whole episode, and it is like something. Like it's like something someone would wear out to like a secret gay club, like except it doesn't fit him, so that's how you know he's straight.
Yeah. Are we allowed to say dykey?
I think so.
If it's I mean, like, it's one of those phrases that I'm always like, you know, that's not our phrase to use. It's a useful phrase. I think we mean it in a very positive sense. I'm always like, oh crap, is that cool? Is that like a real like? Is that someone saying faggy, essentially, you know? Because if someone was saying, if they're a lesbian saying faggy in a TV in a podcast, I'd be a bit like, that's not cool. So but I mean, we certainly mean it in the best way. We think dykey style is just, it's super important. It's all so white girl and cool.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's an empowering word. And
I hope I mean, like, yeah, that's the way I use it, and I hope it's cool.
So,
Actually, I'll ask some friends.
So again, someone else is introduced as one of Xander's best friends in this episode, and ostensibly very much introduced as one of the gang is Jesse. And Jesse's a character who we know very well from another TV show,
6 Feet Under.
And 6 Feet Under, what is Jesse's defining characteristic?
His name is Gabriel?
In 6 Feet Under?
I think.
Yeah.
His defining characteristic is he's a drug addict?
I was going to say that he's obsessed with feet.
Oh, he is obsessed with feet.
He's the fuck guy.
He likes feet.
He does like feet. So he is essentially, again, spoilers, like, will be killed in the next episode. But I think part of Joss Whedon's shtick here is he's trying to introduce him as basically a main part of the gang to give some kind of like emotional resonance to like him being killed off, or a bit of a shock factor to it, which is not a terrible idea. It's not something I hate. She's introduced. She comes into the high school. She meets with Principal Flutie, and he tells her about how Sunnydale High is welcoming to her despite her sketchy past, except until he actually reads what it was. But she's trying to get acclimated to this new high school situation. She literally collides with Xander, who says, "Can I have you?" Which is So this is something we need to look at with Xander, because I don't think he's quite Ross Geller, but there is something like Xander Harris is mean.
Xander Harris, rewatching the show as I got older, Xander is kind of a bastard. Yeah,
he's a real mean, real bigger character, and that is something that, like, he has his positive moments.
He grows.
He does grow, but he goes from being, in many ways, a kind of mean high schooler to a kind of unfulfilled guy in his late 20s.
He's one of those. He's a nice guy.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. TM.
Yeah.
But yeah, and this is like the start of him doing this kind of like friend zoney type thing with Buffy, which is a little uncomfortable.
He also, I found oddly, in this first episode, was kind of portrayed as a bit of a viewpoint character.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, Xander is the first one to realize that she is the Slayer. He knocks in this scene. He knocks Buffy's bag over and finds a steak, which raised a question for me: where is she
getting? Or
Dowling.
What's a Dowling? Oh, Dowling steak. Okay, that's a funny joke.
So raised a question for me: where is she getting these steaks? Where is she whittling these? What store is she doing?
Well, there is that scene in like the end of season 3 or end of season 2 or 3, where they're all like sitting around whittling steaks together.
It's obviously something they can do. It's just when you actually look at a steak, it's like, I don't know where I purchase something to start off with like this.
What'd be great is if you could get like a pencil sharpener for steaks. Yeah, I mean, like, if you just bought one of those, that would like become really useful really quickly. You'd be like, instead of like spending hours whittling, you just be like, stick it in, twist it around a bunch, and then you made a baby.
Pay for itself, basically.
Yeah, that would be great.
And I think there is was talk more about the actual. I have a lot to say about the actual lore of the vampires and how they work, but it's very difficult to stab through a person's ribcage with a piece of wood. So I think there is something specifically in Buffy about that vampires are weak to wood. They either get stabbed out with so there is one who gets dusted with a pencil at one point.
Yeah, and we kind of we spoke about this. We did a little audio teaser thing where we tried to like just talk in front of microphones. It was okay, but we talked about that a little bit then. But there is a scene where, of course, where Faith stabs a person with a stake. But then again, she's the Slayer, so I mean, that's very part of it, like Slayer strength. Yeah. But one of the things I was going to say here is, they go into a classroom. Mm-hmm. And the teacher, it's a history class, and the teacher immediately refers to the Black Plague. Yeah. And that got me thinking, doesn't Darla die, or wasn't she dying of the Black Plague when the Master brought her back, vamped her? Yeah, so we'll have to fact check that at some point, but I'm not sure actually if it's even on Buffy or if it's Angel, in Angel. So Darla's character gets expanded quite a bit on Angel and her relationship with Angel. But yeah, no, it's definitely, and there's a little bit of behind the scenes plot Bible plans for the Master which never make it to the screen, which is that he was a German priest, Heinrich Joseph Nest. He's never actually named in the show, but essentially in this flashback scene with Darla in what we're assuming is probably Angel, she's shown as a
I'm pretty certain she's shown as a prostitute who has contracted, the Black Plague or very bad syphilis, etc. Is dying. She's syphilitic. She's dying, and he comes ostensibly as the priest to give her her last rites and vamps her, and so she's actually
Sure.
Ironically, although she's presented in Buffy in these couple of episodes as potentially the youngest vampire in the pack, she's actually the oldest vampire in that particular coven. Other than the Master.
There's also we can't have this discussion today because we need a lot more information about it. The relationship between vampire and an original person
is fascinating.
Is it a distorted mirror they're shown through? Is it an inversion of their traits? Is it the worst part of their traits that they're exacerbated? It's inconsistent maybe, but it's a real cool point of discussion throughout, because you look at Vamp Willow, you look at Angel versus Angelus, but then you get people one of the major inconsistencies for me is the lady who I really like, who's great, who goes out with Spike, who's my favourite, Drusilla. She follows me on Twitter, the actress.
Oh, right.
Yeah. But Drusilla specifically has pretty much the same personality in and out of drag, I was going to say, in and out of vampire. But
Death drag. The ultimate death drop.
I think the ultimate death drop is probably dying as opposed to turning into a vampire.
Yeah, well, vampires are definitely vamping.
They are, yeah. Anyway, so that's a nice little spin-off into Darla land. But so this is the first the first instance of Cordelia really having a line. I think she might have been in another part there. But importantly, and you should be the one introducing this fact, but I'm going to do it because it's one of the only 6 facts I know about Buffy. Okay. Cordelia is the only actress, and Harmony, I think, are the only actresses in all of the pilot, Buffy, and Angel.
I don't think Harmony is in the pilot of Angel.
Sorry, but no, I don't. That's not. So she's in Angel.
Yeah, so yes, she is. Yes, and I think she might be in she is in the last episode of Angel. So Cordelia and Cordelia's not in the last episode of Angel though.
No, I'm not suggesting that she's in the last episode of anything, but they're in all 3 properties because there's basically that they last from the pilot of Buffy into across.
Yeah. They transition between it.
But yeah, no, Cordelia gets introduced, and I fucking love Cordelia. Mm-hmm. She's a mega crazy bitch, and she knows it, and she loves it. She is, I think, I have never watched 90210, and I imagine there's some stuff in there, but for me, she'll always be the Valley girl, but kind of too cool for school, while also being a sweetheart and being, good really. But Cordelia's character arc in Buffy specifically, I love it. I love any scene with Charisma Carpenter. She's so charismatic and she's wonderful. She gets shafted in Angel, but I fucking love Cordelia.
Yeah, she has a really she's introduced and she's very strong, very strong character, very strong woman character, very confident in herself, has a great tight bun in her hair when she's introduced, which is something I make a note of. Okay. I look very well on her. And actually later on when she's in the bronze, she's dressed in lime green pants and a stripy mesh top, which is a difficult look to pull off, so you have to respect that.
Do you have that word for word then in your notes?
I do. I have taken the copious notes on the fashion in this show. She also says something to Willow, which is possibly the first memorable line from Buffy, which is, "Willow, you've seen the softer side of Sears." And also accuses Willow of being a guy magnet, which is pretentious.
It is pretentious. Willow does well with men. So
she does.
Yeah, so Cordelia obviously very quickly kind of tries to take Buffy under her wing.
She does, and she gives her a quick fire quiz on what's hot and what's not.
Yeah, which is wonderful.
So Cordelia asks Buffy her opinion on frappuccinos, which are apparently trendy but tasty. And another one of my favourite lines, possibly of all TV shows ever.
Yeah.
I think this probably was a much more genuine question to ask someone in the 90s, but asks Buffy what she thinks of James Spader, and Buffy says, "He needs to call me."
Which is just like, I mean, James Spader is not that attractive.
He wasn't that attractive at the time. He is definitely not that attractive now.
No, he's not. I'm sorry, James.
Please be on our podcast.
Please be on our podcast. One of my notes here is Cordelia is dressed like a drag queen. And she's dressed like a drag queen. My other note, and I'm going to stop saying my notes, but one of my notes is Brittany steals Buffy's look. And it's true.
She does.
Brittany, like, full on in the next 5 years or so. When does Brittany become a thing? 98, 99?
I don't think that was kind of queer, so you know the answer to that question.
No, we're not that kind of queer. So, so very quickly, Brittany takes the Buffy look. Has anyone acknowledged this? Has it been reported to the fashion police? Has, like, Cordelia since asked someone about it in a quiz? I hope so. It will be appropriate.
Before we move on to a bit later in the episode, just something I want to mention, which I think, if we're looking at Buffy in terms of the actual, aside from all the trashy aspects, the actual kind of really good character development in it, is we touched on the scene where Buffy goes to Willow. Like, Buffy obviously sees Cordelia bullying Willow at this point, and goes to Willow in a very genuine way and asks for her help catching up on some of the trigonometry classes that she's missed, and they sit together sharing a book, and it's just something like that. It's like it's a scene that doesn't need to be there, and I think in some senses, I think it does establish that the show is, I don't know, trying to do something a little bit more than just like a traditional plot, and it's those moments that build. I think when you look back on Buffy as a fan, I don't think it's just the big dramatic staking moments you remember. It's those little moments that make you care about the characters and gives all the other moments resonance. And I think it's a really genuine moment between two characters and two women that I think is, even in such an early episode, really just gives a nuance to it, which is really phenomenal. Yeah,
and there's definitely an element of just choice there. Essentially, Buffy has decided that Willow is the kind of person she wants to be around. Not just that she's not causing trouble, but that Willow is quality people, and she recognizes that reasonably quickly. And I think that's really important. I'm scared because you've like completely glossed over some very important scenes to get to that part, Joel.
Yeah.
One of which is Giles being introduced.
Yes, Rupert Giles.
Rupert Giles. The other man in our relationship.
Rupert Giles was a very important part of my sexual awakening. This is true. I'm
sorry, Mom.
Sorry to both of our mothers. So yes, essentially Buffy is introduced to Rupert, who is, or as Giles as most people call him, Rupert. We're on a first name basis.
Yeah, clearly.
So I suppose some of the lore of this episode that we skimmed over is that essentially, Buffy has come to town, and the town is over at Hellmouth, which is a portal of mystical, arcane, and sinister energies. The Master is the head vampire who is trapped underneath the town in the ruins of an old church, and his first lieutenant, Luke, who's this big burly vampire, is trying to free him, essentially. And the Harvest, which is the MacGuffin event they're working towards, is essentially to free him from this mystical prison. So Buffy comes to the library, and the library very quickly becomes, for the high school phase of Buffy, is the center of operations. It's the heart of the school. And Giles, who becomes a much more developed character later on, a much less stuffy character, is introduced in kind of high British fashion here. He's and one of the things I always find very challenging about Giles is he always wears waistcoats, but he always wears them open.
Yeah, it's not a great style.
Which is not, just if anyone's wondering, it's not how you wear a waistcoat. But his introduction, he says, "I'm Mr. Giles, I'm the librarian," and he bangs this enormous book on the counter which says "Vampire" on the front of it. A couple of interesting things about this book, which I find very interesting to look at. It is, the actual prop itself is a very famous, ostentatious mail order Bible that was available in America, and all they did was take the cover plate that said Bible on it off and put on vampire, but all of the inscriptions on it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so all the inscriptions that say St. John's, whatever, that's stayed, essentially.
I believe it.
And they make reference, slightly jokey reference later on in the show to the idea of there being a Slayer handbook, and some of the other Slayers have actually done their homework. canonically, this book, the vampire book, that is the Slayer handbook. That is the tome that she's meant to be reading.
I didn't realize that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's something you kind of have to piece together, but it's like that's generally been considered. This is it. This is the Slayer book, which she promptly and I think very, thematically does not accept, and that's kind of an ongoing thing with Buffy is how she breaks out of the cycle of what the Slayer is and those expectations is because she just doesn't take the book.
One of my notes here is Giles looks so hopeful handing Buffy the book.
He looks so crushed when she doesn't take it.
He does. Oh gosh, poor Giles. He has such a fucked up future ahead of him. And when Buffy rejects his advances of taking the book and everything and becoming the Slayer for him, he's like, he asks her, "Are you not Buffy Summers, the Slayer?" And she's like, "No way, man," or something. And he's like, "Are you sure?" And she's like, "I'm way sure."
Yeah.
And that's just important.
I can see that we've taken some of the same notes here because I took that down. I also wrote, Giles is so excited to give her this big ass vampire book.
Big ass vampire book.
So these beaks are obviously landing, but no, and I think then of course we see Xander slinking out from. This part confuses me because there's this dramatic moment where they talk about vampires and slayers and all this kind of stuff, and then after they leave, Xander slinks out from a bookshelf and is like, "Slayer, huh?" or whatever. But he's standing somewhere where Giles was about 2 minutes ago. So, and the library,
the library's small. Yeah,
it's not that big.
Giles would have seen him walk in.
Exactly. He would have had no reason for stealthily coming into his library.
I don't think they thought that through, Joe.
But I did.
Xander has that little beautiful moment. Also, you think that just as a watcher, the first thing you're doing is not
is watching.
Better blow the fucking cover the first possible moment.
Yeah, Giles ultimately great ally, fantastic substitute father figure. Not a very good watcher.
Yeah.
It's really I'm pretty sure he gets let go eventually.
He does.
His performance review does not go well.
But he's not a good watcher because he's different to a watcher, He doesn't.
That's what I said the last time I got fired from a job as well.
That's cute because he's never been fired from a job.
Oh
no, you have actually.
Yeah, I have. So one of the interesting things about Buffy, which I think you and I are both quite interested in terms of there's quite a lot of critical analysis of Buffy, a lot of scholarly analysis.
Yeah. Buffy studies.
Buffy studies, exactly. If it hasn't come out yet in the wash from the extremely wanky way we've been talking so far, you and I both studied English literature in college and have an interest in this from a critical point of view.
Yeah, sure.
And one of the big fields in this from kind of linguistics is, quote unquote, Slayer slang, and essentially at the way that Joss Whedon wrote these characters and the really idiosyncratic way that they speak, the way Buffy and the Scooby Gang speak to each other, not only is unique in some of the ways that it creates words, but it's strongly influenced just a lot of language. I mean, I don't think it's going too far to say that there are things that we say now that we take for granted that are kind of either influenced or directly lifted from Buffy in some ways. Yeah,
and when people are trying to make the case for Buffy as academic text, a lot of the things that they say are about the linguistic uses of it, the structural, thematic implications of the text and all these things. But whenever I think of the Slayer slang concept, it's always in reference to the idea of Shakespeare creating phrases.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But I mean, I don't think it's the same thing. I think that Shakespeare's use of language is very different. Obviously, it's very fucking different. But I think it's a different kind of notion. But the thing I was going to say there was, the big bad. The Scooby Gang, other things, I'm sure. There
are definitely better examples of this we can get into, but just something to bear in mind as we're going through this is that Buffy influenced the way that people speak, and also that there's a real contrast in that the Master and Luke and Giles specifically speaking this very formal prophecy language, and a lot of what Buffy does is about destabilizing that and just quipping and having a cute pair of heels on while still kicking a door down.
Sure.
And so it's the idea
is
of being
queering?
Exactly, she's queering this narrative a little bit. Yeah,
sure, I can buy it.
And so doing this with this kind of peppy teen owned language is I think is part of that, and to the extent that at one point Buffy uses the word "sitch" as in what's the situation, and I can't tell if that was a word that existed before Buffy, because it's such a thing that could have been something that they just said, you know.
Sure.
Because like, where did that come from? So a couple of things that I in that kind of vein that I took away from the conversation in the library was you know, Buffy talking about that you know, the extreme dead guy in the locker.
Yeah.
And saying that I didn't think there'd be vampires on campus, and I don't care, I think is quite a strong name for maybe a sophomore album.
Yeah, sure.
But the
my teen angst as a body count.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
which was actually the first album from first to last, but it's also a line from Heathers.
Yes, exactly, and like, there's some parallels to be drawn there as well.
Yeah, sure.
But Giles has, you know, obviously been practicing this monologue about the Slayer in the mirror every day, because he has this whole thing about how, you know, intergenerational Slayer is born, and
intergenerational Slayer is born.
But he has a line which I think that Anthony Head delivers in a way which gives me chills, which is everything you've ever dreaded was under your bed but told yourself couldn't be by the light of day, they're all real. And I actually think that's quite a cool line of dialogue.
Yeah, you would.
And that is, yeah, and this, but generally this implication of, you know, Giles is British, he's ogre, he's authoritarian, he has all this prophecy.
You mean authoritative?
No, I mean authoritarian.
Oh, okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
And there's an implication, and this is something that is deconstructed a little bit later on, but there is an implication here that all Watchers are male.
Yeah.
There is very specifically a sense that, you know, the Slayer slays and the Watcher watches, and that there is a thing, a specific paternal
gender balance thing there,
which
isn't the case in season 3. Faith has a female Watcher who gets killed by the demon who's like tracking her.
Yeah, and it does quickly become I was going to say decomposed, which is like it's going to be a poem, but deconstructed, because there is her fake Watcher who comes to replace her later on.
Oh, of course. Is that what I'm thinking of? That's what I'm thinking of. Sorry, the Watcher gets killed in season 3 is a male.
I think potentially her original Watcher might have been implied to be female as well. And obviously we see female Watchers or female members of the Watchers Council later on in the show. But there, like, it is ultimately a male organisation, and how it's structured is very male.
I think that's something that we can get into in season 4. That's when that's really dealt with it. Or season 5 too, is that whole idea that the Watchers have really enslaved the Slayer.
Yeah, I think it's bookended, because I think season 7 looks a lot at the specific male-female like lore of the Slayer line, and so does season 1. And in the middle, they, you know, there's obviously stuff there, but I think it's interesting. I think we'll have to look at how that book ends. Yeah.
So have we skipped over the scene with the finding the body?
Yeah, I think what I think is interesting is I think we've noticed the scenes in a different order, which is very worrying since we watched the same episode.
Oh yeah, I'm guessing so you just referred to Giles finding the body, or sorry, Giles or the major dead guy, or so they know about the dead body. I've notes about them finding the body after talking to Giles. So that's kind of worrying, but so important. And I want to tell this fucking joke, Joel. You can shut the fuck up for 2 minutes. Thank you. So the specific exchange that they have there, and I've never heard this before. I've watched this episode so many times. They're talking in the locker room. A bunch of girls. They're about to find the body that's about to fall out of the locker. Classic scene. But one of the exchanges is one of the girls says, "What kind of name is Buffy?" And the other one says, "Hey, Aphrodisia."
Yeah, it's very good.
Hey, Aphrodisia. A, is she named after the night of conception? B, the beautiful irony of the joke. C, how did I never hear this before? How was this buried in fucking subtitle?
It's a very good goof, and you know,
thank you.
It's you know, I think I knew a girl called Aphrodisia when I was in school. Do you know what I mean? Like it's very relatable in terms of, you know,
yeah.
Because I literally, like, my takeaway from rewatching this episode and being a step removed from it was like, what kind of name is Buffy? And I kind of felt a bit seen by that joke, you know.
What kind of name is Buffy? Xander is the most normal name in the whole bunch, and it's fucking because it's Alexander, but it's Xander, like.
But I think a quintessential part of Xander's character is he's someone whose name is Alex, who tries to make himself cool by calling himself Xander on a skateboard. So as they move on from the scene where she rejects this whole Slayer thing that she doesn't want to do, I think that's the first time Giles really sees her as like, this girl is different, you know, because like say every other Slayer is just taking the book and be like, thank you for your big book, you know.
Okay. Just taking the book and said thank you for your big book.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another great line is this is Sunnydale, how bad and evil can there be here?
Can there be here?
Can there be here?
Okay.
And just this whole, again, like you know, with the exception of this is something that people say about Buffy and then they immediately have to qualify it. There's only one big bad in this that is a vampire for the Vampire Slayer as the master, and you obviously have to qualify with the fact with the spiking angel, etc. But like really as like a pure monster vampire, it's the master. And there's, you know, later Buffy is very good, but there's something like really gothic and kind of like dripping with opulence about the like underground church, and the master rises from the pool of blood, and there's this whole prophecy thing of Luke saying the sleeper will wake and saying the sleeper will awake, exactly, and saying amen and all this kind of stuff, you know. It's very like the upside down cross, you know. There's something like classically vampire about it, which I appreciate, you know. And
there's also, I mean, we're completely overlooking two different aspects there about the master. One is that the master is never devamped, which is really fascinating. Like, there's no, that the master is presumed, like, it is very much set apart from the get-go as being that kind of what's the vampire that, like,
Nosferatu.
Nosferatu, but like there's that concept of the vampire that's feasting on its own blood in kind of vampire studies. Let the Right One In, I think, is an example of that. But the idea of that, it's just like it's gone too far, too mangled, too old, too the demon inside has become too entrenched. Well, I think they discuss it later in the show, but very much it has this distinguishes himself immediately as being so fascinatingly different and terrifying. I remember being really scared at the time, and just like facially, great prosthetics were interesting.
Yeah, I made a note of this because some of the other special effects are a bit janky earlier on, but the vampire makeup from the go is quite good.
Okay, no, I have a distinction for you here. Very important distinction. Mm-hmm. Special effects in the show, janky throughout. The in front of camera effects, the prosthetics, the puppetry, the stage magic. It's all great. It's all inventive. It all lasts. It all lasts the test of time. One of the first like major instances of like bad graphics where they over rely on it, because there's something to be said. There's definitely a discussion down the road about over reliance and like on computer generated imagery, and how people have a tendency to use that technology far before it's usable. But one of them was the big snake in season 5. There are two big snakes. There's one in season 4 and one in season 5. The big snake in season 4 is the college one.
I want to say 4 because it is in college, I think, specifically.
Oh, it's actually 3 then, isn't it? Because Cordelia is there.
Yeah, Cordelia is there, yeah.
It could be even 2. Anyway, so that first one, I remember being very dodgy about that graphics. And then the snake, Glory Snake in season 5 is also not good. Yeah. But the puppetry, the prosthetics in the show, killer throughout, so inventive, so cool, and just get me every time. I'm just like, someone had their life doing their job here. They just loved making this mask, this face. It's great.
I absolutely agree, and it's something that I have a real abiding love for, and I think it films like The Thing, which has amazing puppetry and special effects in that. Like, it stands up and it still looks, I don't know if like realistic isn't the word I'm looking for, but it's believable. Yeah. And spooky because CGI just ages so badly.
It does. Unless you're using it so like selectively. Unless you're Steven Spielberg in the 90s, don't be using CGI. I mean, it's not going to work for you. Yeah,
I think Buffy has a reasonable amount of practical effects throughout it. Like, it definitely gets more. You know, I made this on iMovie with the magic later on and stuff. Yeah, sure. Another line that Buffy delivers, which I think is iconic, is Joyce asks her, so they're going to the bronze, she's going to the bronze with Cordelia, which is a very confusing franchise, which I'm going to get to in a second, but it's in the bad part of town, which is apparently half a block away from the good part of town, which I don't think is anything they really revisit. But Joyce asks her, will there be boys there? And Buffy says, no mom, it's a nun club. Which I'm not sure is like going to go down as like the cleverest line of dialogue I've ever been on Buffy.
No, it's great.
And then while she's on her way there, we have an introduction to Angel, played by David Boreanaz. And Angel is, okay, one thing, he's not just like mysterious and tall, dark and handsome. You cannot see him. He is literally like, the lighting is so bad in the scene that you actually can't see that there's a person there.
No, you're right. But he's absolutely gorgeous.
He's genuinely dreamy. He is a gorgeous man. And one of the more uncomfortable things about watching Angel, which we saw watching the show Angel together, is that towards season 4 and 5 they tried to have flashbacks to this time in his life and intercut new footage of him as a slightly more rotund 40-year-old with footage which are supposedly like different angles of the same scene. And he's meant to stay the whole way through his run in Buffy and Angel, he's meant to be 22 physically, which just isn't how that plays out. But right now he is genuinely gorgeous.
No, he's gorgeous. He's like he you can see the like beautiful Native American like lineage in there as well. I mean, like, that sounds so racist, but like he has like Native American features because he's partially Native American, and you can see it. Like he looks just gorgeous. And
when he's introduced, so Buffy is, I think we mentioned earlier, she's balancing upside down on a big of like steel beam girder, and again, in terms of like iconic lines in Buffy, I don't think Angel's first words to Buffy, which were, "Is there a problem, ma'am?" is gonna make it. But you look at him at first and you're like, oh, he's dressed very classically and this is like timeless, and then you realise that he's wearing like a dark blue or black velour jacket, and it looks absolutely disgusting, and the idea of touching it and feeling that fabric, it just makes my skin crawl. Fair.
There's also, I think, there's a he also comes up with a line here where he's like, you're smaller than I thought, and that occurred to me. I think that's a recurring theme throughout the show, as the same way that in season, or the end of season 1, they're all like, oh, your jacket is, or sorry, it's a great dress. I think that's a bit underlined there. I also have a note about the horrifying velvet jacket. One of the things, we skipped past a couple of things there that I wanted to talk about. When Buffy's getting ready to go to the Bronze, one of her lines is, when she's trying on clothes, is, "Hi, I'm an enormous slut."
That's very good.
So there's also, I have a note about Joyce's voice being high pitched. So look out for that if you're rewatching it, because apparently it's a thing.
High pitched Joyce voice.
High pitched Joyce voice. High pitched. I'm not going to say that actually. Never mind.
What was it? Extreme Crime Squad.
Extreme Crime Squad. Yeah. So anyway, there's another note I have here, which is that twice in this episode Buffy's accidentally outed herself, and people would just be like, what the fuck are you talking about, if they weren't basically sotto voce. Where she says here, I'll hang out with living, wait, no, what? I'm not sure what that means. But yeah, she's also like made a reference to the gym full of vampires, and for me this is like she's like, but that gym was full of asbestos in the scene with Flutie. But both of these like very much allude to the recurring theme of Buffy being a Slayer being somewhat analogous to being queer.
Yeah, absolutely. And like kind of trying to drop hints in a way, but also not wanting to be found out. I'm not sure, and you might correct me on this, I'm not sure if this is something that Joyce ever actually says, but there is definitely like this sense of like, Buffy, have you ever tried just not being a Slayer?
That is literally line. That's word for word a line that Joyce says. Yes,
because see, the reason why I wasn't sure if that was the case is I think it's also something that in the X-Men film that they say to Iceman, who is actually gay. But but like that, like there is 100% that analogy. So like, there is good queer representation on this show. I think sometimes looking back at it now, as I could have been stronger based on the standards that we have today, but at the time it was groundbreaking. But I think the narrative, the reason why queer people, the show resonates them quite a bit, because there is that sense of being the same but different, and something marking you out and trying to have a normal life and having, in some ways, abilities and proficiencies and understanding of things that other people don't have, that is both an advantage and a disadvantage. I think just a lot of the style of the show is very much like, commensurate with queer style of the 90s to some degree as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. It definitely, I think a lot of it, that kind of secret keeping, secret identity thing that you're worried your parents going to find out, them watching blood out of your clothes being analogous to something else, that kind of thing is just it's very it's definitely, it's there, and it's almost just text in the end of season 2 when Joyce does find out, and she kind of orders her out of her home. There's no jokes there. It's no bits of
that subtext is quite firmly text.
Yeah. Okay, so why is Willow in the bronze?
What is the bronze? I have and I Brian, would you like to say what t-shirt you're wearing at the moment?
No.
Brian's wearing a t-shirt that has the bronze on it.
It has the whole club. That's the entrance to the club on it.
It has
the alleyway.
The blueprints. But the bronze is a very confusing venue. It annoys me because it annoys me quite a bit because it's obviously a gig venue, but they have. I'm sure there's some stage business making some point about them having fake IDs or something, but they clearly allow in people who are underage. I think like Dong in later seasons is there at one point.
Yeah.
People go there for coffee, but they also. You get the sense that people are drinking, but you never see it.
Yeah.
And people are obviously like doing skanky club dancing at one point. It's a lot of things, and it feels like the kind of venue that like. If Sunnydale is so small that one place has to do all these things, or if there was a place trying to do all these things, that would close down very quickly.
Sure.
And I always felt like it was ripe for, like, they were about to introduce like a wacky guy who is like the owner of the bronze.
Sure.
And mercifully they never did that.
Yeah.
But the vibe of it just changes completely. But in this, like, this is very much like giving a grungy kind of like club gig kind of thing, and I think it's an odd place for Cordelia to go as like a valley girl. But then we also see, and some of the worst fashion in this episode is in the bronze. There's a guy on stage wearing a big baggy blue silk shirt and green shorts.
He's also, one of them's playing a glittery Les Paul, which is very interesting.
Which is a guitar. Willow's wearing a cardigan and she's wearing the same dress. I have a note here saying that she's wearing the same dress as the woman who really believed in sparkle motion in Donnie Darko. So I'm not quite sure what I meant by that. And Giles is here as well, and he's wandering around like a straight man lost in a gay bar. He looks very out of his element, and he says possibly the most British thing he says over the 7 seasons of the show, which that he would prefer to be at home with a cup of Bovril and a good book. Which makes me feel that Joss Whedon had a rather shaky understanding of what British people actually sound like.
Yeah. I also have a note here. Is this the only time that Jaws is voluntarily at the bronze? And yeah, I think it is. What is he doing here? Why is he here? Why is Willow here?
It's odd, and there's a lot of extras in their late 30s who are kind of playing younger in the background here as well.
Yeah. There's also just like a lot of Hawaiian shirts.
There is, and so there's a couple of characters have converged here. Angel is here, who Buffy describes as dark. Or sorry, Angel's not here, but they're talking about Buffy here.
Excuse you?
Buffy is talking to Giles about Angel, who she describes as dark and gorgeous in an annoying sort of way, which I think is pretty much like that sums up Angel as a character.
Accurate.
Jesse is there hitting on Cordelia, and he's really aggressively drinking a bottle of water like he's on E, but like that's not made clear, but like he's just really dehydrated the whole way through, which I think is kind of odd. And I suppose one of the kind of moving into the bringing together some of the threads that they've laid down, like what Buffy of the show is going to be like. Giles is trying to teach her about using her senses and being one with her chi and honing her skills with years of practice, and rather than using that kind of traditional Slayer methodology, Buffy identifies the vampire in the club by his bag fashion sense, which I think is genuinely like a real metaphor for what they're trying to say with the show, that like
it's a bad metaphor.
It's a bad metaphor, but it ties into this thing of like younger people being able to do things and maybe aren't taking it seriously.
Sure.
But like if you've spent 20 years learning off all this textbook material and being able to be like, oh, I'll just Google it, like that, there's something useful there. And I think a lot of what Buffy does is, because she has her friends around her and she has these unconventional skills, she subverts a lot of people who are, and a lot of villains who are really locked in their patterns a little bit. And I think that's kind of like a metatextual thing that they're trying to do.
For sure. One thing that's like agreed. One of the conversations that we overhear here is Cordelia talking to some friends, and she says she has Epstein-Barr, which I do believe to be some kind of herpes. But
a fashionable herpes.
Yeah, I mean, she says like it's chronic hepatitis, or at least chronic fatigue syndrome, and then someone else says, I mean, nobody cool has Epstein-Barr anymore. I just thought it was a nice little direction. Yeah,
and I felt like
let me just look that up. Is Epstein-Barr what do you call it? Herpes?
I think we looked this up and we were like,
yeah, no, I think it is herpes. Mono. It's mono. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, so there you go. She's there bragging about having mono to everyone.
And I feel like it's one of the few, like, Buffy is reasonably timeless in some ways. It doesn't often make like references to like current American politics, or not politics, but just the current American landscape. But I think that dates. I think there's probably some article in the news about Epstein-Barr around the time that people were like, sure, oh, that's the thing, Cordelia is, I think, consistently has some of the best lines across all of Buffy and Angel. Another one is basically Buffy, Cordelia is being led away by this vampire who has bad fashion sense, and Buffy pursues her. She starts a trend of using random objects as stakes and breaks off a table leg. It breaks off in the perfect shape of a stake. It's almost like it was pre-designed to do that.
Almost.
And accidentally tries to stake Cordelia. And Cordelia has the line, "God, what is your childhood trauma?" Which, these are the kind of things, like, the library is open here. Like, this is the kind of stuff people should start peppering in their conversation a little bit more.
Just to be clear there, Cordelia isn't being led away by the vampire. Willow is, and Cordelia gets attacked because Buffy thinks that she is a vampire.
I can't believe it's episode 1 and Brian's correcting me on plot already. I've already lost at the one thing that I bring to this.
But no, it's important because when Willow's talking to the vampire in the crowd, Buffy like immediately has that like responsibility kind of reaction where she's saying, because she had advised her early in the episode to seize the day, and to, Willow saying, I can't, like, no boy's ever going to be interested in me because, like, they want a girl who can talk. And Buffy says, life is short, seize the day. And so when she sees her there with Giles, she has a real sad moment where she says, where Giles is saying, what's Willow doing? Doesn't seem like her. And Buffy says she's seizing the day. I thought it was just a really important, like, thematic beginning of Buffy feeling responsible for literally everyone around her, and having no break and no gaps to just take a breath, because people are constantly fucking taking her advice the wrong way, or they're acting irresponsibly and getting themselves in trouble, and she's the only person who can save them.
And I think something that I completely agree with that, and I think something that's really important to bear in mind that you've hit on there is that, so Buffy's in this episode 16?
Yeah.
So when the show finishes, she's 23.
She is, yeah. Oh, Buffy's 23 when she finishes.
Buffy's 23 when the show finishes.
Nearly 28.
Like, that is... There's something about that which is like, whenever I remember that, it kind of takes my breath away. It's like, she did all of this, and she was like,
she actually looked gorgeous.
She had perfect hair the whole way through. So something I picked up on there as well is that Buffy opens her a shiny clutch that she has and takes out a cellular phone, which is about the size of a walkie-talkie, which is, again, and there's a couple of personal computers in season 1 as well that people have that are like giant portable halt and catch fire laptops, which I absolutely love. But then, so Willow's whole interaction with this vampire is very confusing. I don't know if it's meant to be, I don't know if it's kind of chunky writing, or if it's like a reflection of like her naivete. But she goes away from the club with this vampire who is clearly an older man, and he tells her that they're going for ice cream. But instead she's been brought to a cemetery. Yeah, this is how this plays out. And
she only realizes when they get like deep into the cemetery that, wait, there's something wrong here.
Up until including the point where her date says, "Have you ever been in one of these?" and is pointing to a crypt.
Yeah.
Like, none of this tracks, you know.
No.
It's very unusual, and
you skip past the line that what Cordelia says when she takes out her cellular phone, which is, "Excuse me, I have to call everyone I've ever met right now," because Buffy's just attacked her.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Willow just does not make a good choice here.
They're not good choices, and there's a lot of like suspension of disbelief in Sunnydale, and I don't think that's necessarily bad writing. It's this thing of like,
move the plot forward.
Everybody knows that this spooky thing's happening here, which is deconstructed at the end of the high school arc, you know.
Yeah.
But like another thing that jumps out at me, it's kind of jumping ahead a little bit. But when Jesse is brought to the crypt and he's been bitten by Darla, he says that Darla is giving him a hickey, and there's like this consistent thing of like just the people willfully been like these huge puncture marks couldn't possibly be a vampire bite, you know, which I think is kind of really, really interesting.
Yeah, instead it's falling on what, skewers and stuff.
Yeah, kind of really like, you know, things your parents wouldn't believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they all end up in this crypt together, and I also noticed that Xander is wearing an XXL passion brown shirt over a blue t-shirt. So there's just a lot of really questionable fashion. So I don't.
Is Xander there by this point? Does Xander go with Buffy?
No.
How does Xander get there then?
I'm just saying I noticed this generally during the episode.
Okay.
I don't know why my notes are so randomly out of order here, but
yeah, weird. Go on. I think we were drinking while we were watching this, so we probably
very possibly. So you have your first kind of confrontation in the crypt properly between Buffy and a vampire. Yeah. And I think in the early episodes, Luke as this big hulking vampire, I think he's your first proper example of kind of toxic male energy on the show. You know, I think it's very much like, here is this, you know, like, let's call a spade for what they're seeing is like Willow is being assaulted in this crypt.
Yep.
There's this one 70s vampire, and then this big hulking guy cornering these two girls in a crypt. Like, there's a lot of sinister energy here, and I think it's a specific thing that you know, the first time that Buffy dusks a vampire on this show, which is the 70s vampire, she does it without looking underarm from behind. You know, there's this real sense like that she knows exactly what she's doing.
But no, Luke is like, he is the most man any vampire ever is. Every other vampire has another shtick to them. It's Spike, who's a punk. It's Angel, who is like, you know, the naughty guy, or the love of her life. It's the Master, who's like that incredibly old vampire. Luke is just he's the man
down the dark alley.
Yeah, he's the man down the dark alley who has a deep voice, and one of his lines is, "You're strong, but I'm stronger." And he has a drawl that you're like, "Are you English? Maybe."
And then the episode ends with her being trapped in a coffin with, as I said, the overlay of "to be continued." Again, it comes off very much like a very special episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yep. And like, I mean, it's the ending of the episode of her being in a tomb in a coffin.
Coffin in a tomb.
Yeah, a coffin in a tomb is like, it's pretty distinct. I mean, it's I mean, if it foretells it's a big it's a big sign of what's to come for Buffy, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, just the end of one of the two episodes of Buffy that are not very strong.
You think the first two episodes are not very strong?
Yeah, I think that the fact that it's a two-parter does nothing for me. The fact that they split it up, the whole thing with the harvest is drawn out. It doesn't work for me.
I don't think, you know, I know obviously you know a lot about Buffy. I don't think like the harvest was, I think I'd have to remind you that there was something called the harvest a little bit. You know, it's not something that I think in the average person, average Buffy fan, that's not what jumps out.
Yeah, sure. I think the harvest is the thing that happens in episode 5 or so with the bus crash. But ultimately, the harvest isn't that important. It's all about just like getting more power for the Master, so he can rise, which is the word they use constantly to perform. But so that's the first episode of Buffy, and lots of great elements to it. But it's just not my favorite.
A lot of, I think, threads laid there that really are picked up as the show goes on. I think this is clearly a slightly uneven first episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't. I don't think as a show it transforms at any point.
Yeah, that's true.
That's probably a good point to wrap it up.
Let's start wrapping it up. I mean, okay, so one of our bits is that we're going to steal the bit of rating the episodes. So
yeah, well, in now to be fair, I don't think any one podcast or format has like copyright idea of rating something. So I think we can do that with some plausible deniability. So, okay, well, overall, what's your feeling on this episode?
Yeah, so it says a lot of good stuff. It has lots of the stuff that becomes great about Buffy. There's lots of funny lines. There's lots of engaging parts. The characterization of some of the characters is just way off. Even Willow, I don't feel the Willow stuff off her immediately to some degree. Cordelia is right there immediately, but that's because, again, Charisma Carpenter is just incredible.
Mm-hmm.
The interaction with Flutie in the office, I found funny, but like kind of weirdly just like not plausible, where he like rips up the thing card, and he and she like just the Buffy nearly dropping the fact that she's a Slayer into conversation a couple of times. That never happens again. Buffy's so much better than that. But no, for me it suffers from the thing that pilots suffer from, which is just it doesn't know what it's doing yet. That's fine. It takes a couple of episodes to figure that out. But it's what I don't like about pilots. It's what you like about pilots. It's what I don't like about it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you say about the stuff with Flutie, because I think what's happening there is Buffy has a very distinct sense of humour, and I think what is informing the humour in this pilot episode is the theatrical film Buffy the Vampire Slayer more than anything. So I think there's a transitional thing happening here. But yeah, no, I can 100% see like I said, like I love the first season of Buffy specifically because it is like it's like seeing someone really famous, you really love their work, you're really attracted to them, and then seeing them when they were 16 when they had like frosted tips. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like this is seeing Buffy before it was cool a little bit. I enjoy that because, and also I just think there's something very earnest about pilot episodes. People really kind of like, please buy our television show a little bit, you know. But no, I think if I would probably okay, so if we want to rate the episode, we have to decide what we're rating it out of.
Out of 10?
Out of 10 what?
We decided this? We have to make it up, do we?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think so. I think that's what we're going with, right?
Sure, that's fine with me. I would probably give the episode 5.5 Epstein bars out of 10.
Okay. Starting off on a nice obscure one. Okay, I can definitely see that. I would probably give it... What do I feel about this episode? I would give it 7 Epstein bars.
No, you have to give it a different rating.
Do I do it? Is that the thing?
Yeah.
Okay. I would give it 7 skateboards.
Oh, Joel, you're better than that.
Fair joke? Very good.
Yeah. Come on, you have a better one there.
Okay. I think I would give this episode 7 aphrodisias out of 10. Because I think it has to be judged for what it is and in comparison to the episodes around it. Like you can't compare this like so many shows don't even get more than 1 or 2 seasons. You can't compare this episode to The Body, for example.
No, you can't.
They might as well not be related to each other. So I think in extreme, I think it's a 7 out of 10. I think it does a very good job. My area of expertise would be pilots and early seasons of shows like this. I think it does a really good job of establishing the characters and getting the ideas out there, and I think it manages to fit in some moments of characterization and some very genuinely, Buffy Summers is there, Joyce is there, Giles is definitely there, but I think it's good. But I think it's a good starting point, but has a long way to go until it's the show that we know and love.
Or love. Okay, well then I suppose all we have to say is thank you for listening. If you listened to this, you didn't, we know it. It's okay.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end. This was a lot of fun to do. We're never going to do it again.
Never again.
No, we appreciate people taking the time to listen, and we're just doing this for fun and because we enjoy talking about Buffy, and we hope you enjoy listening about Buffy. And if you want to tell us your opinions on it, that's cool too. Just to figure out how you're going to do that.
Yeah, we'll drop in some information about how to do that.
Bloop, dropped information right there. Okay, bye.
Buffy bye.
Buffy bye.